What about now?
Yep, we're good now.
You can see. Okay. I don't know what I did. I just logged back out and I didn't do anything different. Whatever. Okay. So this is Romare Bearden's Rocket to the Moon. Once again, this is a collage. Let's talk about what different things he's associating in here to create this image. Don't think too hard. It's a collage. What's a collage?
Pieces of different images.
Okay, so what is he associating?
The different photos from other people.
Yeah, exactly. So he's putting together different photos. He's also putting together different pieces of the city that he lives in to create this one image. So those are the two different ways that he's associating in here. Questioning. Questioning is a little bit more complex. Normally on board or canvas, you would paint. So right now he's questioning how you would normally create artwork on a board or on a canvas. Collage was a newer concept in the 60s and 70s, so that's how he was questioning there. Observing. What do you guys think he must have observed or took pictures of to create this?
The people around him.
Yeah, so he observed the people and the city around him. Very good. And networking, pretty much same deal. He networked with all of the people around him. And experimenting goes back to the idea of doing a collage and experimenting with putting different images together. So, like I mentioned at the beginning, when discussing artwork, normally in this class, we will be looking at formally trained artists. However, occasionally we will be looking at untrained artists. It does not mean because they're untrained that they are not creative. Untrained artists or outsider artists are just as creative as formal artists, sometimes even more so. Normally, in the context of outsider art or folk art, it can be anything from quilt making to Native American art to children's arts to art created in mental asylums, anything like that. It's made by someone that doesn't have a formal educational art background is considered folk art or outsider art. Once again, folk art and outsider art are not bad. They're not less than regular formal artwork. It's just that they are usually kept out of museums and galleries because of their lack of ability to network with those particular circles of people. So speaking on outsider art, the first outsider artist that we're going to discuss is Simon Rodias, Nuestro Pueblo, or Our Town, which is located in Watts, California. He made this particular artwork using found objects and a homemade version of cement. And he made them from 1921 through 1954 until he died or until he couldn't do it anymore. I think I have someone from California in this class. Do I?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Is Watts, California the kind of place that you would normally want to go?
I do not know. I've never been there.
Oh, okay. Well, Watts, California is not the nicest area in California to go to. So there's the random 100-foot tower in an area that's not really known for artwork. Normally, art is showcased in gentrified areas. In fact, if you have a bunch of galleries popping up around you, it means you're being gentrified. If you don't know what that word is, you can Google it later. But Watts, California is the exact opposite of that. And there is a 100-foot art sculpture in that particular city. Like I mentioned, Simon Rodia is not a formally trained artist. He is not like, he was basically a construction worker. And in his spare time when he wasn't working, he would go home and put together all of these different found objects into his homemade concoction of, it's not cement, but it has the same basic concept of cement, and put it together. So none of this is structurally reinforced. Once again, it's 100 feet tall and it's not structurally reinforced. That's not super safe. Because it's not up to building code standards, when Rodia died, it was originally set to be torn down. However, in the late 50s, a movie star purchased the land that it was on for the purpose of trying to make it up to building code standards. So they structurally reinforced everything with steel beams and rods. And now it's still there and it's open for public viewing. So let's see if we can apply creativity to Watts Tower or Nuestro Pueblo. So as far as associating, what things do you think were connected in this artwork? It's similar to the collage.
Maybe his career as a construction worker.
Yes, so he had background in construction work, so he made a very large structure in his backyard, yeah. What else is associating?
The lost things that he added to them.
Very good. So all of the accumulation of the random objects that he found. Questioning. What did he question when he was making this?
He questioned how normal construction is.
Yeah, that's the big one, yeah. I like to joke around and say he questioned the normal function of a backyard, but that's just a joke. Because he did do this in his backyard. His house was originally right in front of this. Observing, possibly what did he observe before he made this?
Maybe like the construction workers around him and like the emptiness of his backyard.
Very good. Yes, those are correct. And networking has to do with construction as well and interacting with other people that are in that business. And experimenting is a whole lot of this particular piece. Like I said, he made his own concoction of cement because he couldn't afford cement. So he just made his own through experimenting in the sense of creating a 100-foot building out of found materials and some, like I said, homemade cement, and seeing how tall he could get it. Our other example of a outsider artist is the Philadelphia Wireman. He's called the Philadelphia Wireman because no one knows who he is. So in the 1970s, in an alleyway, a bunch of these little sculptures were found, discarded, and someone put them in a gallery, and then they ended up in a museum. So this particular outsider artist ended up in galleries and museums all over the world. Ended up really, really famous, but no one knows who he is, or she is. It's another example of found artworks put together, and all of these particular sculptures are wrapped with wire. Most likely, the Philadelphia Wireman died and someone was cleaning out their home is the main reason why people think that all of these were sitting out in an alley next to a dumpster. But yeah. And of course, this is just as creative as Watts Tower and any formal artwork that we've discussed. So just because something is an outsider artist or informal doesn't mean it's not creative. Same with Native American and Native Mexican artworks. Even though they're not formally trained, it's still extremely creative and has a lot of meaning behind it. Same with children's art. To a child, that means a lot. There's their grandma. And it's creative in their sense. And if you really want to, you can apply the 5 traits of creativity to that too. Moving on to add to our vocabulary of what art is and different kinds of art, we're going to talk about the 2 main types that you're going to see in this class. The first of which is representational art. Representational art depicts an object or a thing as realistically as possible. So it represents something that we see. Figurative art is a type of representational art that depicts a person as the primary subject. A subject is the object or person that's depicted in a representational art. I'm going kind of fast on this because most of it's common sense, I think. I think you guys know what a subject matter is. And then, of course, trompe-l'oeil is the fun French word for fools the eye. So that means a painting that looks so realistic that people think it's real and it fools their eye. Such as the image that we are going to look at next, which is a smoke backstage. Give you guys a couple seconds if you're trying to write something. So here we have William Harnet's A Smoke Backstage, which is representational art. It is not figurative art because there's not a person in it. It is representational, however, because it is trying to depict as realistically as possible in painting format a pipe, matchstick, newspaper, and tobacco. Another example of representational art is Rene Magritte. This is not a pipe. That's what that translates to in English, that title there. So this is a image of a pipe painted as realistically as possible, and right under the pipe right here it says this is not a pipe. So let's ask someone a question. Angel, is this a pipe? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. Jonas, is this a pipe? Yes or no?
It's a painting.
Thank you. Yes, it's a painting. It is an image of a pipe. It is not a pipe. That's just a fun play on words. Magritte does that with things. He's a little bit cheeky. So technically it is a pipe, but technically it's not a pipe. It's a painting of a pipe. So neither one of you are wrong at all. And once again, this is just another example of representational art. This is definitely not a pipe. It's by Ray Beldner. This is actually sewn dollar bills. So it's not a pipe, it's currency, which is just another fun little play on words. Our other type of art that we're going to be looking at throughout these classes is abstract art. So you had representational art, which was depicting an object as realistically as possible. And on the complete opposite side of that spectrum is abstract art. which doesn't usually have reference to objects. Sometimes it does depict natural objects, but in extremely simplified and distorted ways, such as cubism. Cubism, they are depicting objects just in very distorted senses of things. And sometimes abstract art doesn't depict anything at all. We're going to look at one in a second that depicts music. You can't see music, so yeah, we'll talk about that. Abstract art has been in existence since the BCE era, and we'll talk about what BCE and CE stand for next class. If you don't know, but it means it's been around forever and it's seen in pretty much every culture. So if you see things like geometric patterns, those are technically considered a form of abstraction. But we're going to be looking at an abstraction of a cow right now. I'm going to skip the stool for a bit, because I do skip around a little bit. So here we have our cow. You can still pretty much tell it's a cow. This one's from 1917. This is also a cow from the same year. This is also a cow from the same year. This is also a cow from the next year. See, we're getting a little bit more abstract, but it's still a cow. So sometimes abstraction can still be referring to a particular object, just in extreme exaggeration. So another example of that is Piet Mondrian. So over here you have him depicting in a very Fauvist style a tree. And then slowly he goes into a more cubist style of a tree. And then eventually he gets to a style called Dichstil that he invents, which is, it's still a tree, but it's an extremely abstract tree. Another type of abstraction is non-representational art. Non-representational art means it's not looking at an object at all. It is presenting in a visual format something that you cannot normally see, such as sound. A great example of someone depicting sounds is the artist Vasily Kandinsky, which is what this image is right here. Kandinsky was very interested in depicting musical scores in a painting format. So he often titled his artworks composition. This is one of his compositions, like you would see a musical composition. He listens to the music and then he imagines what that music would look like. So that's an example of non-representational art. Another example of non-representational art is Thomas's Gray Night phenomenon. It's not really representing anything having to do with a gray night. And another example of non-representational art is these geometric patterns right here that we see. It's not representing anything, it's a pattern. Does anyone have any questions about the difference between representational art and abstract art before we get any further? None. So, how many of you prefer, raise your hand using the little hand icon if you prefer representational art? Yeah. So a good chunk. Faith, why do you like representational art more?
I think it's easier to understand and maybe see where they're coming from.
Yeah, it is. You guys can put your hands down. How many of you prefer abstract art? Ricardo, why?
Because I like how it isn't like super specific. You kind of have to think harder to get into the mind of the artist and see what they were trying to draw.
So that candy spill is another example of abstract art. I personally like abstract art, but that's because I like the complexity of it. Because like Ricardo said, you kind of have to get into the mind of the artist. But it's pretty common for people to enjoy representational art because, like you said, it's just easier to digest. And usually representational art shows off the beauty of objects a lot. So yeah, everyone has their own preferences, and you are totally correct in your own opinion. Everyone has their own opinion, and we're going to keep seeing that throughout this class. Your opinions are never wrong. They're yours. And please don't let anyone else influence your opinion unless it's expanding your knowledge and appreciation of different things. Then by all means, why not? So next we're going to move on to a tougher concept, which is the difference between looking and seeing. Yes, they sound like they're the same things, but there's a slight difference between the two. And then we're going to go into form versus content. So I've been using the terms looking and seeing a lot throughout this presentation today, but there's a difference between the two. Looking is the most basic form of taking in an object. It's literally just seeing it for what it is and not going any deeper. So if we were looking at, yeah, we can talk about the candy spill because it's just the easiest one to understand. If you were looking at the pile of candy, you would see a pile of candy. But if you're seeing the pile of candy, then you're seeing that underlying story of why is this 179 pounds? What happens when I take a piece away? What's the story behind it? So looking is just the overall view of something. Seeing is studying it and really understanding the stories behind it. So here we have this photograph right here. If we were looking at this photograph, it's a pepper. It's a photograph. That's looking. It's a bell pepper. It's a picture of a bell pepper. That's looking at it. But if we're seeing, we're going beyond that. So this is open to anyone. What do you see? What do you think of when you look at this photograph? Do you think of a bell pepper or do you think of something else?
At first glance, it kind of reminded me of like two people like embracing each other.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
the more that I look at it, it's kind of like you can see that it's kind of in this state of decay.
Yes. Yeah. So good. That's exactly what normal people would see at first glance. When I look at it at first glance, I think it's two people embracing. But then if you study it further, you notice that it's a pepper that's in the middle of rotting and decaying. So you are seeing now the underlying story and more depth to that photograph. When we were looking at it, if you look at the title and the medium, you look at a pepper and a picture of a pepper. But if you're seeing, then you're actually getting the depth and the story behind the photograph. So that's Edward Weston's pepper. He made that image through a long lapse of time exposure of 2 hours for the photography to take place, which is why it looks a little bit fleshier than what a normal pepper would look like. Once again, just like everyone's entitled to their own opinions of art, everyone sees art differently. I think we touched on that yesterday when we were looking at Janet Eckelman's cactus. The next concept and the last concept for today is, well, last complex concept for today is form versus content. Form is similar to looking. Form is the overall total effect. So once again, form for this would be a photograph, whereas content is the actual meaning. So looking is to form as content is to seeing. Two examples of that are the two kisses. There's actually a lot of the kiss in art history that we'll be coming across. I think yesterday one of you guys put up Klimt's The Kiss, but today we're looking at Rodin's The Kiss and Brancusi's The Kiss. Rodin's The Kiss is right here. It looks like two lovers kissing. The form of this image is marble. That is the overall thing. And then also for form, you have a man and a woman. The content is that they are lovers kissing. So form would be the marble and the man and the woman. The content is the story, which is two lovers, which is what you're assuming. A lot of times with content, sometimes you have to assume. Our next The Kiss is Constantine Brancusi's The Kiss. Very different from Rodin's The Kiss. Here our form would be limestone, two limestone blocks. Well, not really two, they're technically still connected right here. And our content is two limestone blocks connected forever. Forever and ever and ever. So not so much the passion as this one, so much as the length of time. They will never be separated. They are connected for eternity. So that's just to recap that the easiest way to remember looking and seeing and form and content. Looking and form are both the overall, usually medium and content. And I shouldn't use the word content. Looking and form are the overall medium and what is in the image or what the image is depicting. And seeing and content is the story or the meaning behind it. And once again, sometimes with the content and the seeing aspect, there's a certain aspect of inference that we have to make as a viewer. And of course, different viewers, because we see things differently, we experience things differently. And that all goes back to our cultural backgrounds on how we look and see and experience artworks themselves. I'm going to skip that one and move on to our last concept of this particular lecture, which is iconography. And it's our last vocabulary word for this chapter. Iconography is a fancy word for symbolism. So for example, if I held up an apple with a bite taken out of it, you would probably think Apple products. That's a symbol. Or the Nike swoosh is a symbol. Those are also forms of iconography. Iconography has existed for a very long time in the history of art. Some of the earlier images and the easier ones for us to relate to today are from the Renaissance period. And we're going to look at those in a second. During the Renaissance period, people were very invested in religion, specifically Christianity. Pretty much everyone knew the stories of the Bible very well. So a lot of the people that exist as figures in the Bible were shown in the form of iconography in artworks. So a good example of that would be this one. If you are familiar with the Bible, you can probably pick out who these people in this image are. This is the Renaissance work by Raphael called the Madonna of the Meadow, and it is a painting. So if anyone is really familiar with their Bible stories, they can probably figure out who this woman is. And in Renaissance time, everyone would recognize her. Does anyone know who that is?
Is it Mary?
Yeah, that's Mary. Frequently in Renaissance paintings, Mary is usually wearing a blue cloak, and she's normally somewhere near a baby. In this instance, this baby. Who is this baby? If this is Mary.
Jesus.
Yes, that's Jesus. So these two are the easy ones. This one's a little bit harder because you'd have to be super, super familiar with your Bible to pick him out. But this is a little baby that's wearing animal skin and carrying a wooden cross. And if you're really, really familiar with your Bible stories, you would recognize him as John the Baptist, Jesus's cousin. John the Baptist in Renaissance paintings is always depicted with an animal skin and carrying a cross. So here's another example of Renaissance iconography. Who's this lady?
Mary.
Mary. And who's this baby?
Jesus.
Jesus. Who's this thing with wings?
An angel.
An
Just kidding.
angel. And this dude wearing an animal skin is?
John the Baptist.
See, this is easy. We grasp iconography. Iconography exists in other cultures as well. So we looked at Western religious symbols. Now we're going to look at an Eastern religious symbol. Who is this guy? Kind of in the title, so you can probably figure it out.
Buddha.
Yeah, that's Buddha. So in Eastern religions, you would recognize things like bodhisattvas, Buddha, Ganesh, people like that. Those are symbolism. Now let's bring symbolism to the 20th century, at least the 20th. 21st century, no, 20th century. What is this?
Soup.
That's a soup can, yeah. So this is an example of pop art. This particular image was by Andy Warhol, and this is his famous Campbell's soup can. Pop art is a particular art style that really plays on the idea of iconography, because the whole idea of pop art is using extremely recognizable images, such as a soup can, that people would be able to relate to, and masses would be able to easily digest and interpret what that is. And it was popular. Soup cans were popular. Who is this lady? A lot of that lady.
Marilyn Monroe.
Marilyn Monroe. So even though we are not from that particular era, she's still extremely recognizable, which means that Andy Warhol, when he was making this example of pop art, did a really good job at picking his icon or his symbol. So, any questions about chapter 1? I know it was a whirlwind and a lot of vocabulary, because that's the end of chapter 1. Any questions about any of the topics that we talked about iconography, about representational art, non-representational art, abstract art? Any questions about any of that? None? No one has a question about that? Okay. So we only have 10 minutes left. So what we're going to do is a little exit ticket to go ahead and get us thinking about the topic of tomorrow's class. Before that exit ticket, we're going to do another little Padlet. I'm going to put it in the chat. There is the Padlet link. If you want to click on that link in a second, I'll put up the QR code if you prefer to do that. But today's Padlet link is about tomorrow's topic. Today's topic was all about the question of what is art and what is creativity and what are the different kinds of art. Tomorrow we're going to go and build on that a little bit more with the idea of what is the purpose and the function of art. So like I said, I'm going to put up the QR code now if you prefer to use that. So you guys can go to that Padlet and go ahead and answer the question that's up there. And if you prefer to use the QR code, it's right here along with the question, what is one purpose or function for creating art that you guys can think of? Of course, there's no right or wrong answer here. This is your own opinion. Your opinion can't be wrong because it's yours. So it does have a lot of purposes. Good. It can portray someone's beliefs. That's a really good one. Religion is a very important purpose and function of art. So is expression. Entertainment is another one. Good. For joy. These are all really good answers. Expression, lots of expression. Which I'm not surprised that there's a lot of expression because most art that's created today is created for the purpose of self-expression. So I totally understand why a lot of people put that as an answer. Okay.
Unless
Yeah.
I can find it.
You can't find it? It's okay. That's okay. Because I want to wrap up and make sure to go over some important stuff. So if you didn't answer, that's fine. Just know that tomorrow's topic is going to be the purpose and function of art. So tomorrow we will be going over chapter 2. You might want to check it out ahead of time if you have the book. If you don't have the book, the PowerPoint for tomorrow is already available. If you want to look at it, you don't have to because we're going to go over it tomorrow anyways. Your first quiz opens Thursday and closes Friday. It is over chapters 1 through 4. Just a reminder. I'm saying these things because they're questions that I had asked yesterday. The recording will be posted probably within the next 20 minutes. It takes me a second for it to get loaded up. A lot of you guys emailed me asking me where the syllabus was located yesterday. It's located under the announcements page on Canvas. It's located under the syllabus page on Canvas, and it's located under the files page in Canvas. So in 3 different areas is where you can find the syllabus if you're looking for it. The textbook is like the name and the ISBN code of the textbook is on the syllabus. So if you find the syllabus, it's in there. My office hours and numbers are in there. The PowerPoints for these lectures are under your modules section in Canvas. Your quiz is also found under the modules section in Canvas. All of your quizzes and assignments for this class are on Canvas. Obviously, it's open book, open notes, because I can't control what you're doing at home. So, yes, that was a question that I got yesterday. As far as notes, you guys are in charge of your notes for this class. So if you want to take notes, which I would highly encourage you taking notes, go ahead and do that. If you want to take notes when you're reading, do that. I would focus mostly on vocabulary and examples of that vocabulary if you're going through the reading and taking notes doing that. If it's your book, then you can highlight it. Are there any other questions before we wrap up? We have 4 more minutes. Any questions? No one? Last class had a bunch.
Is it highly suggested to look over the chapters before we go over them in class?
It's not required, but usually your participation levels are a lot better. And since that's kind of what you're getting graded on for attendance wise, it would be recommended.
Awesome, thank you.
I would at least skim over it and look at those black vocabulary words if I was doing the bare minimum.
Are the quizzes going to be more correlated with our own personal reading from the book, or will it be more with the PowerPoints?
I would say that it's about 80% the lectures and 20% the book.
Okay.
And there's 10 questions, so you can pretty much figure out the math on that. Any other questions? Nope. If you guys don't have any more questions, you can leave. I'm going to stick around in here a little bit longer if you just didn't want to ask in front of people. I'll see you guys tomorrow.
Awesome, thank you.
Bye.
Did you take attendance?
Yes, and I got you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I just had a personal concern. So this class was supposed to be in person on campus, and it was going to be from 9:30 to 10:50. Well, I do have one class that starts at 11, which is in person. It's a biology lab.
Yeah. I have
so,
another person that's doing a government class at 11. My recommendation, which is not ideal, that I don't have a classroom. I have nothing right now. So I don't have a space for you to sit in, but there's Wi-Fi all over the campus.
Okay.
The library's open. I had someone in there for my first class and they did really good in there. It's quiet and they'll give you a space in there. There's hallways. There's some classrooms that are being used right now that people can sit in and just do their lesson. I'm trying to think of anything else. You can get the Wi-Fi outside if you're an outdoorsy person.
Okay. I knew the student center wasn't open, and I hadn't been on campus, so I wasn't sure what else was open. I didn't want to be scrambled.
Open, and I think that the little eating area is open.
Okay, that's perfect. I just wanted to make sure. Obviously, I'll have to do this at the school.
It's not great at all.
Alrighty. All right. Well, thank you. I just wanted to see what I do.